Well, good morning. Welcome to our first service today. Y'all look so good. Got all these crazy sweaters on, hats and dresses, Roger, and good to see Joanne here and Karen back there. I love all of you, and I just thank God for this time of year. It's a special time. Thursday night, as you know, we sold our house, and we haven't moved out yet. And we've been living there all that time, and then our our furnace went out, and so it's not my furnace no more. It was under some kind of home warranty, so we've been without heat for like a week and a half. And they said, we'll get it fixed just probably within 10 days. So 10 days. Good hand for that. It'll probably warm up after that. My wife has been trying to teach me to be more positive. So I'm going to try to preach a real positive sermon. She's been studying this one of her devotion things, and it's talking about being positive. But Thursday night, the new neighborhood we're moving into, they were having a get-together, and they wanted us to come because they wanted to see what kind of neighbor was moving in their neighborhood. They didn't know if they need to sell now or what. And so we went to that, and first thing, the president of the little community thing there, she said, would you like to pray over the meal? I go, absolutely not. I said, here's the thing. I just want to be a neighbor. Jesus kind of talked about a neighbor being a good thing. Just be a good Samaritan neighbor. Just be a good neighbor, and that goes a long ways. So I didn't move there to be their resident pastor. I didn't move there to be their resident minister. I've told a lot of you that's why if I go on a cruise, I go on a cruise just me and my wife, because what happens on the ship stays there unless one of y'all are there. But it's a fun time of the year. And yesterday then, we got to go down to Knoxville and see our grandchildren. I got the best grandchildren in the world other than your grandchildren, right? I mean, for y'all. But for me and Sharon, God picked out the right grandchildren for us. They are so much fun. And but they're into a lot. We got there and we had to divide and conquer. So me and Michael, we went to one basketball game. And then while we was at one basketball game, my wife and my daughter-in-law was at a dance thing. And then they had to hurry and change in the car to get over to a tennis match, and which my grandson, the littlest one, will just not quit winning. And then they had to hurry and get to the Coliseum because our middle grandson, he played electric guitar at the Coliseum with about 2,000 people there for the Nativity. We had to see that. And so it was so amazing just to do all that with our grandkids. And we're there. And if you've ever get a chance to go, it's free. And it's been going for 55 years. And it's in a big coliseum. They have real animals. Most of the time they have donkeys and camels and sheep and, all this stuff. This year they didn't have a camel, but they had all the other animals. And you see the whole city of Jerusalem, the way they got it set up, very good. They got a heavenly choir. I think this afternoon's the last showing of it, but it's in the big Coliseum. And my older granddaughters have both been in it. And even to be in it, your mother has to work, or father has to work as a volunteer for 3 years before your kid can even get in there. I think that'd be good for our Christmas play, right? But I want to tell you something that happened. We're watching this live thing, And so Anna Drake, she's the oldest. She's 12, going on 20. And she gets up there and she goes, I said, what do you think about it? She goes, well, there wasn't just 3 wise men, 3 kings. there was 3 gifts, so people assumed there was 3 kings. There were probably like 20 kings. And I go, yeah, that's right. That's what a lot of commentaries say. I said, that's pretty smart, Andre. And so they told before this thing started that this play has been going on for 55 years. 55 years, it's the Nativity story. And so we get there, and our middle grandson, he goes, he's 9. He says, I wonder where the first, I'd like to see the first baby Jesus, because he would be at least 55. Who thinks like that? Like, can they bring all the baby Jesuses back and line them up? I want to see how they made out. Are they still baby Jesus? You know, but my smallest one, the tennis player, 8 years old, he goes, I said, well, Price, what do you think about that? Did you learn anything new today? He goes, yeah, I didn't know Mary was black. It's volunteers, so they have all kind of volunteers, and sure enough, Joseph was white, big bearded guy, and the baby was white, and the mother was black. And I said, well, to be honest, if you're trying to typecast the whole thing, son, I said, you know, they had some friends called the Patels, or Indian. I said, their skin's coming out lighter skin. That's probably the color skin Jesus and Mary and all them had. And I said, so, but it's just a play. Yeah, but I just never thought Mary was black. So, I mean, they learn stuff that we never will ever learn. I mean, they pick out stuff. At least they were paying attention. So, I like that. And it was good. But I want to get into the message today. And it is coming from your little booklet, so you can get them out. And it's on Ecclesiastes, the 11th chapter. And I want to go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. This is the day that the Lord hath made. And God, I will rejoice and be glad in it. Whatever kind of day that's going to be, whatever it's going to look like, whatever it may hold, I'm making a choice that because you made this day, I'm going to rejoice and be glad. And God, I pray that you'd help us get the story from the preacher, Solomon, and that we'll get the story of Jesus Christ today in this message. And I pray that you just open our hearts and our ears that we can hear what you've got to say. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. In the 11th chapter of Ecclesiastes, he says, cast your bread upon the waters. That'll cause you to have soggy bread, but cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. I want you to underline in your little booklets, you know not. You know not. See, Solomon was so good. He had vineyards, and he had staff, and he had gardeners, and he had everything you can imagine. So he was so productive that he could produce enough grain, enough barley, wheat, and all this stuff. He could make enough bread that would feed all of Jerusalem 100 times over. Bethlehem was called the house of bread, probably because of Solomon's great efforts in knowing how to do all this stuff. So what do you do if you can make more bread than your city can eat in a month or half a year? You take it, and he was very much into the trading of this bread on the seas. And so they would load up grain and stuff, and they would take it to other areas, and they would sell it there. And so he says that we need to cast our bread out there on on the water. In other words, take that grain, get it out to other areas. It's just going to spoil here. I mean, we got all we can eat. And I think about Bethlehem being the house of bread, and then realizing that Jesus was born in Bethlehem and he was the bread of life. So it's really unique there. But he said, don't just put your grain on just one ship, divide it out among like 7 or 8 ships. And the thinking behind this is there is always a risk if you put your grain out there, because we even know that Paul almost was shipwrecked 3 times, and the weather there was sometimes quite awful on the seas. And so you could put your bread on that ship, your grain on that ship, and that ship could go down, or it could be pirated. Pirates could come aboard and take what you've got. So divide it out, disperse it among 7 or 8 ships, and some of those are going to make it, and they're going to bring back a return. They'll trade for something else. And so he's telling us right away that we got to go through life, and as we go through life, we have to invest in life, and we got to move on with life. We can't be paralyzed by uncertainties, because life is full of uncertainties. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know, and so all you can do is, it was great investment strategy. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You divide them, because if you fall down, all your eggs broke. You divide things out, and you put some on this ship, on some on that ship. You send them out. Some areas you may get trade for this, and over there you get trade for something else. But that was the point, that we're living in an uncertain world. And the way we know this, he said, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. But you do it anyway. You do it anyway. Then he says, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, but he who regards the clouds will not reap. And so what he's saying, he said, I'm just telling you that if you're waiting for a certain time to get something done, you probably will never get it done. I remember we first moved to this area. There was an area that you could go and farm free of charge. They let you have the land. And so my grandfather always farmed, so he said, why don't we do that? Well, in that area, the place that we were going to farm, whatever land it was, I don't remember too much about it, but you could do it. You go there and break up the land, you sow your seed in there and all that, but there was no water there. And so you had to depend 100% on the rain. And so if it didn't rain, you didn't get anything back for your investment. But he says, if you just look to the clouds and you're wondering, well, should I do it or not should it? Is it going to rain? Is it going to be a bad storm? I don't know what the weather's going to be, so I'm just going to do nothing. You're going to be sitting at home, don't have anything to eat. Because if you don't sow, you don't reap. And he tells us in the very beginning of this book, there's a time to sow and there's a time to reap. But he's telling us here in the 11th chapter, even though you do the right things, you sow, there's a time to sow, there's a time to reap. There's a possibility if you do all the right things, you still won't have a harvest. Because we're living in a life of uncertainties. And so even though we're living in the uncertainties, we have to trust in the sovereignty of a great God. He's a great, great God. And so we have to do some things by faith. And by faith, we just go, okay, I'm going to do this by faith. Some of you got money in the stock market by faith. It's by faith. It can go up, it can go down. And we do it all the time. You invest in something and you don't know if it's ever going to pay off or not. And so that's the first part of this lesson there, that there's uncertainties in life and you can't know. And then he says in verse 5, as you do not know, circle that in your little booklet. You do not know the day, you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones of the womb of a woman with child. So a man and woman can get together and they can start the process of having a child. You know, the man has to do all this work. My son, he started doing stand-up comedy, and he got in a very prestigious boarding school. He said it took him 9 months to get in, and he had to go through the right channel. And he was talking about being born because his mom taught him school. You know, he was born into this homeschool. And so it's kind of like that. He's saying here, you do not know. And he says, when someone is with child, they don't know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of the woman with the child. You ever thought about that? You know, men, don't ever ask your woman, you know, like if she's pregnant, when you get home from work, what you been doing today? I've been making a baby. Can you do that? It's pretty amazing. But he says, we don't even know how that happens. We don't know how that from a man and woman, that seed, that egg, we don't know how that there starts to be these bones inside. We don't know how that happens. He says, you don't know. You don't know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of the woman with child. And you do not know the work of God who makes everything. He goes, well, I think I'm going to have a child, but I don't know about if I want to have a child or not because this is a wicked world we're living in. And we don't know what they're going to grow up to be, whether they're going to grow up and be something great or they're going to be an axe killer. You know, we don't know. And so if we approach life with all the things we're not sure of, we're not know, you will never do anything. And then he says in verse 6, in the morning sow your seed, and at the evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper. This is that, or whether both alike will be good. So he's telling us right here, there's so many things in life you don't know about. You just have to go ahead and do it by faith and really walk in with God. You got to walk with God in this thing and let God bring you through it. And God can help us. Then he starts in the next verse there. He starts and he goes a little bit different direction. In verse 7, he says, light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. And let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, though, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. And the first part of verse chapter 12, remember also your Creator. Remember also your Creator. So he's beginning to show us something here, and like someone that does great poetry, the preacher, they call, you know, Solomon the preacher. The preacher here, do you realize he talks more about joy than possibly any other preacher in the Old Testament? He's talking about joy. He's come to know something about God. And he says, morning light always is something powerful. The part of light is sweet. You know, have you ever had a night that was so long that you were just glad that it was over? You ever had a long night and you're just going through the night and you're like, man, I'll be glad when morning gets here. And you know, it says, you know, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. I've had a lot of times I was like, man, I wish that sun would come up. And I'm another person, I do not like winter. I don't know if I have that, you know, they call it seasonal whatever effect. Sad. I'm sad. But I do not like winter. I like sunshine. I was born in Miami, the sunshine state, and if I don't get enough sunshine, it makes me grumpy. You know, they say in the morning, do you wake your wife up? You know, do you wake her up? You know, or does it make her grumpy? He said, no, I just let her sleep, you know. And sometimes it's like that. I need my sleep, but I love the sunshine. Sometimes it'll make you feel better just to get out in the sunshine. So here we're going to find that Solomon, the preacher of joy, is going to begin to tell us how to have a better day. He's going to show us. He said, he introduces us to the idea of a God-conscious joy. And beyond, he's going to show us how to preserve that God-conscious joy. Verse 7 there, light is sweet. It's sweet for there to be light. And there's something powerful about light. And so in our world, the preacher says the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. Morning light always triumphs over the darkest night. I want you to think about this. Morning light always triumphs over the darkest night. It's in the midst of the blackness. The sun is already hastening to the place where it arises. One of my favorite places is Key West. One thing about Key West, you can go down there, and that's one place you can look and you can see the sun rise on the Pacific side, but you can see the sun go down. You can see both the sunrise and the sunset right there on the water. And it's amazing. If you're on the East Coast, you can see the sunrise. You can't see it go down. If you're over on the Gulf, you can see it go down. It's some of the most beautiful pictures you can gain there. But he tells us here that morning light always triumphs over darkness. For those experiencing darkness in this crooked world, past delights in the light, a light awakens fresh desires for dawn. You know, the shepherds, they didn't have lighting and all that, so they would have the moonlight. If it was cloudy night, they could hardly get around. And so it was a very dark night. But another thing I come across is in the first work week of Genesis 1, the Bible records it this way: the day did not end in darkness. We always say the morning and the evening was the first day. That's not the way the scripture says. There was evening, and then there were morning, and that was day one. That's Genesis 1 and 5. So when we arrive to the story about the Bible and about us, we realize that we started in darkness. All of us started in darkness. We started in darkness. So there's a darkness, and then it goes to lightness. It goes to the light. It goes from dark to light. And there's a reason that he did this, because this great writer, Solomon, he's going to use light and darkness metaphorically. And on the one hand, the preacher associates darkness with both trials, chapter 5, 17 and 18, death, as noted in 12:2, in death the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after rain. So in death, it seems like, everything's so dark and gloomy. And you know what it is? It feels like when you lose someone. It's hard to get up. You're just going around in darkness. And so life under the old creation, Solomon's saying, life under the old creation all ends in death. It all ends in death. There is nothing to be gained under the sun. And he's talking about this natural existence. But then the preacher says in 2:11, then I consider all that my hands have done and toiled, and I expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. And there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in the light than there is in the darkness. So he's telling us here there's a greater advantage if we walk in the light of Jesus Christ than we walk in darkness. He's using that metaphorically again. He parallels the difference between wisdom, and he calls wisdom light, and then he calls foolishness darkness. He claims that wisdom and light supply real gain. So he experienced both. Sometimes the wisest man, Solomon, walked in foolishness and his life was darkened. And he couldn't see the light of day. And nothing was good. And everything was vanity. And here's the thing I want to bring out about this. I think sometimes us Christians get too pessimistic. Because we're supposed to be children of the light. And if we're children of the light, we are to see the goodness in every darkness. We are to see the answer in every problem. Because we're children of the light. We're not children of the darkness. And so we should be excited in the Lord. And he tells us that he uses these conjunctions. Two is better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. And he says, for if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. He uses that same way. He's going to give you something. He's going to tell you why. He said, light is sweet and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. For if a person lives many years, he should rejoice in them all. And he should remember that the days of darkness will be many. Solomon is a realist that about half of your life's going to stink, folks. He never promised us a rose garden. He said there's a time to be born, but guess what? If you are born, there's going to be a day also that you're going to die. So if you're born, how many's born today? You're here. You know what's awaiting all of us is death. We're all dying. We're all dying. And so he talks about that time to be born, a time to die. Two different poles. Preacher calls us, he says we're still to rejoice. He said there's a time of planting and plucking. There's a time of killing and healing, weeping and laughter. The preacher calls us to rejoice in times of mourning and dancing. Rejoice, he tells us there needs to be some rejoicing in the very midst of mourning. There needs to be some dancing in the very midst of mourning. Embracing and reframing, seeking and losing. The preacher calls us to rejoice in times of silence and speaking, loving and hating, war and peace. The preacher calls us to rejoice. For everything there is a season and there is a time for every matter under the sun. So he's calling us to be these positive people. You ever been around a killjoy? A wet blanket? I think about when the shepherds, they were out there, taking care of sheep, the same old, job they'd been doing. And the angel comes to them. And they were terrified. And he said, don't be afraid. I bring you great tidings. I bring you tidings of great joy. In other words, I'm going to tell you about somebody that's going to change your world. They're going to rock your world. This Jesus Christ is going to be born in Bethlehem, and he's going to bring great joy. I don't think there's enough great joy in the church. I think there's too many Christians talking about all the bad stuff they hear on CNN and Fox News. I think that we are to be the happiest people, the most celebrating people on the face of the earth. That's why he said, eat, drink, and be merry. If you've got a chance to eat, drink, and be merry, you need to do it because tomorrow may not be that kind of day. He's trying to get our attention that you need to enjoy the good times. And I found that to be the truth. That it's good to enjoy the people that you're around. Take it in. Take it in. Let it be a part of you. Some people, they're not very happy. I heard of this little Christmas story, and I've always loved it. These parents had two boys, and one boy was an absolute pessimist. He could not be happy about nothing in the world. The other little boy was just an absolute optimist. And so they said, well, we're going to try something. So they bought the little boy that was a pessimist. They bought him a brand new bike for Christmas. And so he goes running in there and he opens it and he looks at his bike and he goes, Oh no, I got a new bike. If I ride it, I'll probably fall down and skin my knee. Look how pretty it is. I'll probably get the tires dirty. I don't even know if I can ride a bike. I don't know why you got me a bike. You must not like me. And so the other little boy, they got him a big old box. He went in there and he couldn't wait to open his present. His brother got a bicycle. So he opens that present, and first thing he sees is a bunch of hay. And he's digging down through the hay, and he's looking around. And then he gets to some horse manure. And he's jumping up and down. He's so happy. He is so happy. And they go, son, what in the world's going on? Your brother got a bike, and you just got a box of hay with some horse manure. He said, yeah, but if it's a box of hay with some horse manure, there's got to be a horse somewhere around here. I just believe we need to be the kind of Christians, if you get a box full of horse manure, you need to be happy about it. It's true. And don't give me no box of horse manure. I know who the people I'm dealing with here. He tells them, he says in chapter 11 and 9, he said, rejoice, oh man. In other words, we got to choose to rejoice. I'd like the team to come on up. We got to rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Verse 7 and 8, I've already identified God gives grace and help to us in our quest. But 7 times in Ecclesiastes, the preacher calls us, the reader, to pursue after joy. That we should go after joy with everything we've got. That we should desire joy. You know, and I really think I've been down in the dumps. You know, we put our house for sale, and I've had mixed emotion about my house selling. I've loved it there so much. It is too big, that house on the lake, and I'm thankful that God let us live there 18 years, and we got to fix it up. But it holds so many memories. One of my best friends, Jimmy, helped me lay the floor. And I could tell you so many stories. Well, I probably couldn't tell you very many of them. Probably wouldn't be good. But we laid those floors in there, and he done most of the work. And he'd tell me, I'd get off from work, and he'd say, all right, I'm going to draw some lines here. He said, when I get back in the morning, you better not have that out of line. And I'd do a little bit of it. But you know, a house holds a lot of memories. That's the only house my grandkids have ever known. They come for Thanksgiving, and we had a big time. And when we have a party at our house, we have a party. Usually there's always karaoke involved. And it's usually really bad karaoke. But you know, my grandkids, they love to come to our house. And if anybody puts Mustang Sally on there, my wife's going to dance to it. We went to see our granddaughter in the British Virgin Isles, and we went to the regatta, had all these boats out there, and they had this really good band, and everybody just standing around listening. And my wife said, if they play Mustang Sally, we're dancing. And I don't know if my daughter-in-law or who told them, but anyway, it was like a couple songs after they started playing Mustang Sally. So we go out there, and we go out there on the beach in that sand by up where the band was, and we start dancing to Mustang Sally, which I'm no dancer. I'll confess to that. But it wasn't long. It wasn't long until that whole area was filled up with people out there dancing. We used to sing a song back in the 60s, it only takes a spark sometimes to get a fire going. When you get that fire going, others can warm to its glowing. I think the Christians could be the ones that are the spark of every party. I think, if I go on a cruise, I never tell them what I do for a living. They'll go, we'll tell you at the end of the cruise. We went on this Viking cruise for 15 days, and these people from Scotland and England, it was kind of like a family thing. They had 2 more seats. They invited us to their table. We laughed and cut up, and they kept asking what I did. Sharon said, well, if you get it right, I'll tell you, but other than that, I'm not going to tell you. So they thought I was a lawyer. I'm like, oh. And they named stuff every night. Toward the end of the week, they said, are you a minister? And Sharon told them I was. And they said, I could see myself going to your church. I could see myself going to your church. And I'd bought this German outfit, this, what do they call them things? You don't go in one of them shops with a bunch of German ladies that you can't speak the language and tell them you want to look at something, because they'll just start ripping your clothes off and putting it on you. Before I knew it, I went out of that place with it on. And I told all those people at that table, I said, I'll tell you something. I said, we're on the internet. When I go home, I'll wear that the first Sunday I'm back to preach in. If you promise me you'll be on the internet. They say, you won't do it. I bet you won't do it. I did it. We're still good friends with those people. I'm just saying, we can be an example of joy. We can be an example of a spark. There's some crazy people in our church called Shane and Lynette and Denise and Mark, Shorty and Sharon. I told them if you hang out with a minister, you may end up being in a sermon one day. They were putting out on the Facebook, right on Facebook, they were going to Aruba. And I go, y'all didn't invite us. What's up with that? And they said, well, you are invited. You need to go. And I said, you don't want us to go. They said, yeah, we want you to go. I said, well, what happens in Aruba stays in Aruba. We got over there. They did invite us. We did go. We had the best time. Mark, me and Sharon and you and Denise and Shorty and Sharon and Shane and Lynette, we may go some rough times in the near future. But when and if we do, according to Solomon, about half of our life is not good sometimes. We may go through some sad times. But I can tell you one thing that'll always bring a smile to me is we've rented a van for all of us to travel that island. And we put this thing on there that we could just pay and we don't have to go fill it up and this, that, and the other. That when you bring it back, you can bring it back empty. So we got to our last night. We went out to eat together. And old Mark was driving the van. He goes, we still got a half tank. And we're not taking this van back with any gas in it. So for about 2 hours, the island went down and had a turnaround, roundabout. And then down at the other end of the island had another roundabout. Right through Main Street. We done the roundabout for 2 hours. We sung everything from Mustang Sally to all their favorite 70s and 80s music. But if you're ever around them very long, especially Lynette and Shane, you'll be singing gospel. We done the gospel. We had all the windows rolled down. We was yelling as loud as we could. We were acting like a bunch of kids. But sometimes those joyful days will take you through your sad days. And that's what he's telling you here. Life is too short not to rejoice. It's too short not to rejoice.